Welcome to the third in our series of 5 webinars on running your own internet business. My name is James Farmer. I'm the CEO of WPMU Dev. And in the last 2 sessions, we've talked about whether you should start a business, and if so, how. We've talked about how you need to be committed to marketing above all else, and that perhaps if you're not, you might want to give it a miss as well. But today we're going to largely skip all of the reasons you shouldn't do something and figure out that, yep, you've decided to give it a crack, and here's how to get started, specifically with hiring people. Because I'm just guessing that as you're put together your business plan, as you're running the marketing, as you're putting all of these together, even if you are a really talented developer, you don't have a vast amount of time to give over to that. I think that's true for everybody. When it comes to actually building and developing your product, supporting your product, doing all of these different things, you're going to need help. And I can, without a doubt, speak to this from experience, given that I would put myself forward as to be, frankly, the least technically talented WordPress company, plugin founder, whatever thing, that you are co-founder, that you are likely to ever find. Like literally, I kid you not, it wasn't until 2003 that I encountered my first bit of HTML. I think I peaked in about 2006. I'm fairly sure I've never actually written an authentic line of HTML. I've done a copy and pasting and certainly a fair bit of editing, quite badly. CSS, no idea. PHP. My co-founder Andrew used to try and teach me little bits of PHP. That didn't work. I have basically almost zero technical skills. I can just about use Web Hosting Manager and cPanel. That's more or less where it stops. So I really needed somebody to help me get into this business and to help me kind of realize the ambitions and the things that I wanted to do with on the internet, largely using WordPress. And how did I go about it? Well, if you trawl back through the old WordPress MU forums, rather than the .org forums, the MU forums, multi-site forums are a little bit niche, you can actually see how I went about it. And it's, to be honest, a way that I'd recommend you might give it a crack as well. Essentially, you find an area, a space, in this case, a set of forums. It could be a Facebook page, it could be a LinkedIn group, it could be any LinkedIn group, all sorts of different things. But in that group, you participate, you help as much as you can, you provide as many answers as you can, you welcome, you engage, you talk. And essentially what you're doing is you're doing 2 things. In the first instance, you're meeting people who could be incredibly useful for your business. And in the second instance, you're developing goodwill. You're demonstrating how you are somebody who's engaged in this, you're somebody who cares, you're somebody who helps, and you're building relationships with these people based upon that. So when it comes time to find people to help you out, find somebody you can trust and you care about, and I'm just assuming here that you haven't got the opportunity to go out and spend, kind of 150 grand on a new CTO and hire a recruiting firm to get them. This is a wonderful way of meeting people who you can trust and people who can help you out. And I say that because especially important is the trust part. I was so fortunate to run into Andrew and later Aaron and Bay and different other wonderful developers who've come and worked with us, because what they allowed me to do was to develop a hiring methodology, to develop a way of finding developers that I'd like to share with you today, which I think can work fairly well in terms of not only finding the right people for the right amount, but also in terms of making sure that those people that you do find are engaged with what you're doing and like working with you. It's not just a one-sided, I'm going to find all these people, put them in here. It's I'm going to hopefully find the right people and they're going to find me and feel like we're the right people for them as well. My secret little trick to this is doing most of it through recruiting means that cost probably, I don't know, $100 tops, I reckon, per hire. But there is some of your time involved. And like I said, you need a technical person to help you out. And this is why. So I know that you're familiar with sites like Odesk and Elance, now known as Upwork. I think Elance is going to be phased out shortly. Odesk is no more, and freelancer.com. Now, a lot of people are going to have an immediately negative reaction to that, and that's fair enough. I've seen people being burnt the whole time. I've been burnt. Often you end up with terrible solutions from those sites, lots of problems and lots of stress. It doesn't really work out, but it doesn't have to be that way. I reckon you can use these sites to find and hire some really good people for yourself and for your company. And that's actually what we at Inksub at WPMU Dev tend to do, as well as a few other things. But what I'd like to do is, in terms of giving you an overview of where we're coming at, is how you can do that and how you can do it in a way that will find you developers that like you, that you can like, and that can keep on going, and how we do it. So, step one. First up, you need to really focus on the ad that you put into let's say, Upwork freelancer.com. This is a lot more important than it sounds. If you look through these different career websites, if you look through different freelancing sites, the ads, they're more or less the same. People have just dashed them off, or if they have written them at length, they've often written them with the usual string of cliches. That's not good. It's not you. It's not compelling. It's not engaging. It's bland. It's boring. It's everything else. Put a video on there. Talk about the role. Speak like yourself. Make sure about 5 people check it and tick off that it's interesting and it's concise and it's going to work for you before you actually put it up there. But that particular piece of content you're putting up there is what's going to attract or repulse or just cause people to go meh when they look at your ad, and it's a really important thing to start. And in that piece of content, you should specify incredibly clearly that you are looking for individuals, not companies. I cannot say this enough. Why are you going to a site like Upwork or like freelancer.com and looking for companies? I mean, it's like searching for a middleman through a middleman. It's in the inception of hiring. You might think it's easier. Oh, they'll take care of business. They'll do this, they'll do that. No, they won't. They'll just take like half the money and give it to themselves rather than actually giving it to the developer. You might think it's easier. It's not going to be easier. Your outcome isn't going to be better. Specify individuals only. This is a really cool way as well to immediately get rid of half of the spam that you'll receive, because it will be from companies. In terms of cash, it's up to you, but I think you'll absolutely be looking at a minimum of around $15 US per hour at a minimum of 40 hours per week. So let's say $1,000 or so kind of a week. And my maths are terrible. I just 500. Anyway, regardless of that, really anything under $15 an hour, obviously, I think you're going to struggle with finding the right sort of people, so you've got to be reasonable in that. Of course, that can happily go up to $100 an hour if you're looking for kind of a crack sysadmin or something like that on a part-time basis. But let's just assume you're looking for a developer at the most affordable possible price point who's going to be quality enough to get your job done. That's the kind of cash that I think you should be looking at. There's also, though, another really neat trick you can do. And this, I call it a trick, but in reality, it's a really awesome test to decide whether or not you are in the right ballpark for your developer and whether they're in the right ballpark for you. And that's on your application form. Ask them how much they'd like. Honestly, it's outstanding. Have a field that says, I'm looking for X USD per hour. And then when you get that through, you'll be able to see, okay, this person's looking for like $60 an hour. Let's face it, there's no way I'm going to be able to pay that. And so therefore, and never mind, kind of send them a nice better, talk about that in a minute. Or at the same time, somebody might come through at like $5 an hour. It's like, seems a little bit weird, like slave labor. And essentially it allows you to kind of balance out where the quality of applications are and the money as well. Because if somebody does come through and they're looking for a really significant rate, you can also look at the work they're doing and judge it accordingly. Like it might well be the case that somebody might come through at quite a low rate and their work might actually be of not necessarily up to the standard you're after, but they could fill a great role in, say, a technical support role rather than a core developer. But knowing the hourly rate is a really good place to start, because if you do all of these discussions and you talk about all of these things with each other, and then you get to the final point and you say, okay, well, I'd like to offer you this amount of money, and they turn around and go, that's crazy, that's way too little. You've just wasted a vast amount of time for both of you. So ask the hourly rate. Another little trick, make sure that you make it clear that you won't accept any applications whatsoever on the website that you're advertising on. So if you're advertising on freelancer.com, you put a link in, you say you must apply here. Of course, to keep in the terms of these sites, you can say, I will happily manage, I'll happily pay people through freelancer.com, through Upwork, if that's what they want. But fundamentally, you say you won't accept a single application through that site. They have to click on the link, copy and paste the link, and then they have to apply on your site. This again is brilliant. What it does is it gets rid of all of those spammy idiots who are just going, oh yeah, I'm great for this job, I'm great for this job, and replying in about 10 seconds to your application, or who are just trolling through the entire site doing that. This means that they have to actually take an action, they have to step onto your site, and they have to apply through there. And last but not least on that front, when you're putting together the application, as well as having a form for like how much they want to earn per hour, also give them a small task. So by this I mean something that they have to at least consider. So let's say we're hiring a plugin developer. Ask them to post a URL to a publicly available plugin that they've developed, or even better, 2 of them. And you could ask them to, post to a Git repository or anything like that. But essentially, make it so that it's just not them copying and pasting in their resume. In fact, if you're going to ask for their resume, give them a field that they can just put in as a PDF and ask them to actually write you a little message at the end. At the end of the day, there's an awful lot of people using these sites of work, and you will be able to find great developers through them. But there's also an awful large amount of spam and people who just, are just applying willy-nilly for everything and are going to waste a huge amount of your time and make you wish you'd never used the sites. These methods help get rid of them. They help establish a good footing at the start. And as long as you've got your developer guy on side, you get to then review the work and take it from there, which is the second part of the application process, because now you've presumably got your 20, 30 odd candidates who've come through that specified the amount they want. It's not too stupid, not too low. They've provided examples, and your technical guy has come on and said to actually evaluate them. Now, but before you do this, this is where you start having to do some work. And a lot of people aren't that keen on this particular part of things because it's incredibly time consuming. And often when we get to this kind of stage, I feel myself going, oh no, here we go. Because I know that, I've got days ahead of me that are going to be spent essentially emailing and interacting with potential staff. But you have to do it, it's worthwhile and it's important. These people who have come through, they've spent a time and effort. They've gone to the site, they've filled in the details, they've provided with you examples, they've done all of these things. Now you need to send them individually emails explaining the next steps in the process and asking them if they're cool with that. What does that look like? Well, fundamentally, you're going to tell them that you are interested in their application, that you would like to invite them to do a trial task, unpaid, which is about the same length as an interview, to have a look at and the work. Then you're going to say that if they pass that, you're going to give them a paid trial task, around say 1 to 2 weeks, at whatever rate that you determine is reasonable. And then you say, and if that works out well, you're going to offer them a job. And it's really as simple as that. The reason that you're going to say this now is because this gives them the opportunity to either ignore you because they just don't like the idea of that process, or get back to you, in which case you pass their examples over to your developer that you trust and you ask them to grade their work. The developer, generally I ask them to go, spend literally no more than 5 or maximum 10 minutes looking through the plugin code, looking at the way that it's put together, and all those funny things you developer guys do, and give us a score out of 10. I know it's very rough, but it's a great indication. And more or less, more often than not, anyone over 6 gets to go to the next round. The next round being a short trial task. If they haven't made this, by the way, send them a nice email, saying, "Oh, I'm very sorry to hear it just hasn't worked out. Apply again in the future." Reason being, A, it's polite, it's reasonable, they've made the effort, and also they're interested in your area. They could well come through again in future with a really good application. I think our support manager applied about 3 times for the same job. In a way, this is kind of like free marketing. You could even tell them to sign up for your email list in order to hear about new job applications. Always be building, always be marketing. Anyway. So give them, as I said, a short task, a second short task. I say it's like an interview task. So if you were going to come to an interview, I'd expect you to do, kind of definitely 3 or 4 hours of research and background and building and development. Then you actually travel to come to the interview, talk to me for this period of time. There's a time afterwards. There's question and answers. Let's call it a day's work, tops. Even though, of course, some people do put more time into interviews. And say that if they do it to the standard you're looking for, you're pretty much guaranteeing them some paid work afterwards. What we generally do is we give each developer exactly the same task. And even better, it's a task that's already been completed by the developer who's going to be vetting them, which can be actually really interesting. They can learn a thing or two about different ways that people are doing things. For example, it could be a simple modification to a plugin that we've completed, but it hasn't been released yet. It could be a simple plugin in itself. It could be customizing a theme. It could even be answering a bunch of technical support questions. But really, it's I don't know, as I said, kind of a 4 to 8 hour piece of work that they can then return, and then you can compare against all of the other submissions that you've had. It will give you a great overview of how well they've done. Again, after they've done this, we're going to give this over to our developer. Except this time, I generally say, okay, well, I'd like you to spend, unless this is patently or awful, probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes on this, reviewing it, and I'd like some feedback notes. The reason I'd like feedback is these people have put in kind of a significant amount of time. They deserve feedback, regardless of whether you're going to give them the role or not. And if they are going to progress to the next stage, then you probably want to give them a few pointers as to the sort of things that you want them to do. The next stage being, as I said, a paid trial. And this is really important. A lot of people, they think, oh, have I got the time? Have I got the effort and the energy to go through this? Absolutely. If you don't do it, then you could well end up losing a lot more money and going back and having to repeat this whole process. Often we'll actually get kind of 3 or even 4 candidates through to the paid trial stage, which is essentially a 1 to 2, maybe even 3 week project that actually contributes to the business, and that involves you introducing them to your developer in person, having a Skype meeting, talking about details, and essentially saying, oh, you do this right and then you'll get a job. And we actually have done that. We've hired all 4 people who've come through to the paid trial process. We've also been in situations where we haven't hired anybody, But I think it's a really nice thing to do, and it's really encouraging to say to people, okay, well, there's a job at the end of the line here, just complete this period well. And really, this is kind of like the interview where you decide how well you work together. But rather than sitting in a room answering questions like, what's your worst attribute, you actually get to see what people are like in person, both in conversation and as developers and over time, and to see their work as it comes through. I'm a huge advocate, and of course, most of the time, because we're talking about sites like Upwork and Freelancer, these guys are going to have availability and opportunity to do this free trial, if not full-time, then on a part-time basis. And so why not take that opportunity and go through it, even though it's going to take you a lot of time. Then hopefully at the end, you've got yourself an awesome developer. But there are two other things that I'd like to say around that point. The first is when we sent them originally to the site, and you put them into a link to where they're going to apply, I think it's really important that you spend a lot of time and put in a lot of effort on that site. If you have a look at inksub.com/careers, or just inksub.com and click on the link in the navigation, you'll see that we actually spend a heap of time. We were looking for designers, I think, originally, or we are front-end developers. Anyway, so there's this kind of repeating parallaxy thing in the background. There's this nice video of us working together. I think we're looking for people in the office, so we really wanted to kind of convey that kind of positive, creative, interesting, collaborative environment. And you have to spend an awful lot of time on that. It's not just enough to kind of put up a simple link, simple application. You're essentially trying to attract people who are really good. As I said at the start, with a really good job description, but you also need to attract them visually. And if they're a developer, you need to make sure that the code and the way that the site performs and everything is wonderful too. If that's something that's hard for you to do, then we'll see if there's a way that you could achieve it through other means. It's really not something that you can shrink on. And the second is the final kind of secret weapon tweak or trick, which is that, yes, I said you can have a look at obviously Freelancer, Odesk, Upwork as a place to find people, but the most successful place that you'll be able to find people to work with is actually probably right in front of you. And this comes back to the marketing side, the always be building, the always be developing your email list. We've had far more success with hiring people by putting out job ads over our email list than we have had through using these contractor sites. Yes, that's easy to say if you've got a 250,000 person email list that you've developed over the last 10 years in the WordPress development field, but it equally applies to pretty much all other fields, and especially if you've been doing it for some time and you've been developing your reputation, your position, the people on your list might well know somebody. You could even consider offering like a finder's fee, or like let's go crazy, let's say like a free iPad mini or something to whoever, if somebody is able to introduce you to a successful candidate. But the reason why this is particularly cool is that you are talking to people who know you, you are talking to people who value what you do, and you're talking to people who understand what you do. And so more often than not, you're going to get a lot of people coming through, and it sometimes surprises me how unwilling people are to really kind of exploit their own social presence, Twitter, whatever, email lists, blog sites, in order to try and find the right applicants or the right people to work with them, because of course you could be talking to them right now. Why would you go off and try it somewhere else if you can do that? But although of course I would recommend that you try both, because nothing beats finding the right people and having the right people to work with. And that is my kind of online hiring methodology in a nutshell. It will be going up as I post. There's various notes in the near future with this video. And you're welcome to ask me any questions on there with any more details. There's obviously a bunch of links, a bunch of information on there. Or I think we're happy to take some questions now as well through the webinar. And I think Ray is in the other room. I'll just fire this up now. Okay, Ray.
All right, let's kick off with some questions. Thanks for everyone who's been watching. Firstly, an easy question. How much time do you spend on the hiring process? What percentage of your time do you spend, sorting through applications, organising tasks, that kind of thing?
That's a really good question, and I kind of alluded to that a little bit in the presentation, where I think I described my feelings as coming to a hiring process as being more or less like, oh God, no, this is terrible. What am I going to do? Specifically because it's a vast amount of time. Honestly, when you get into actually hiring properly using this kind of process, it's going to take up, it's going to be your priority for days and weeks, in fact. Not only in terms of the amount of work and the amount of communication and the amount of back and forth, the amount of management you're going to do, but also in terms of it really being right at the top of your list. So you're kind of like on tenterhooks. Okay, this comes through, I've got to respond to this, I've got to sort this out. And he's facilitating and essentially running all of that, as I still do when it comes to hiring staff. It takes up a absolute chunk of time, and you want to be right on top of it, or everything slows down and it all falls to pieces. So yeah, it kind of becomes overwhelming, but at the same time, it's worth it.
Can you take a stab at the percentage of your time, though?
A percentage of my time, I reckon probably, let's say if we're doing a full hiring process, it will probably take about, if you don't include the paid trial, because hopefully by the paid trial you've got it down to like half a dozen at tops, and then you kind of hand them over to developers and work with them. Say like 2 weeks, I'd probably say about half your time you can do it properly.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next question. So in the article that accompanies this webinar, which we'll post on the blog on Tuesday, you say that finding devs in the early days of WPMU Dev, in your words, was terrifying, and you went through, in quotes, absolute losers at an absolute rate of knots. Expand on this with some examples of what actually happened. I mean, obviously, what happened in the early days is, you refine that over time, but how hard was it finding people when you first started out?
Awesome. Yeah, as you noticed, I didn't actually talk about that in the session. I thought I'd start with something other than me talking about what an idiot I am. For once, just to change it around a little bit. I think fundamentally the problem is when you're starting out, you feel like you don't know anything. You feel like I'm stuck in this vast sea of knowledge and different people, and so you don't kind of feel confident going out there to try and find people in the way that I've just described, using contractor sites or your own. You often look for kind of personal relationships. You look for anybody who's there and willing to give you a hand. Certainly, while I was fortunate enough to bump into Andrew and to develop a relationship with him, who worked in the multi-site forums, there was also, I won't use any names, but there was certainly a couple of developers who essentially kind of came in. I think I basically kind of gave them all the money that I had available, and they then disappeared and didn't actually do the work, or they just kind of like messed around, or like there were so many examples of people just being. You put all your trust and resources in them, and they'd be like, yeah, of course I can do that, of course I can do that, and then it would just go horribly wrong. I think EduBlogs is a great example, actually. You wouldn't believe the amount of people who will tell you that they know how to look after servers. They can manage servers, they can manage databases, they can do this. No, they can't. Honestly, I kid you not. It was actually Barry, the sysadmin for WordPress.com, in the end, who put me on to a friend of his who was stupidly expensive at the time, and who but who saved us there. And even though I haven't, we have hired good sysadmins over contracting networks as well. But yeah, you kind of get floundering around, which is why it's so important to be systematic about it, and also to have somebody that you can rely on technically, or in a marketing terms, or even in support terms, who's going to be able to help you evaluate those people.
We've got a few questions from people who are watching the webinar. Jude Rosario, who's actually one of our staff, has asked, which roles do you think work well with remote hiring and which ones not so much?
Yeah, good question, Jude. Hey, how's it going? It's actually, I think you'll find that the way that kind of Inkserve as a company is split up reflects that in my thinking. I think when it comes to kind of design, when it comes to UX, perhaps when it comes to writing, marketing, those sorts of things, it's kind of like overall, this is what it is that we do, then that's something that really you want to try and do kind of in person as much as possible. There's so much kind of tacit communication, there's so many subtleties, and there's so many areas around that that are very, very hard to do remotely, and that we haven't worked so well with. However, when it comes to having like an awesome support team who are able to cover 24 hours a day, unless you're planning on keeping your office open all night and kind of just getting somebody to stay up from midnight until 8 a.m., then support and sales is a fantastic area to cover. And I think that a lot of people who are kind of involved in that area are really familiar with communicating remotely and working remotely, and can really construct great virtual environments where they feel like a team and they can work together as a team. So that works really well for me. I also think that sometimes you find a bunch of developers, and I don't mean to stereotype here, but I think there's definitely a tendency with some developers to want to be able to sit on their own in private, putting together code. And that's something that it can also work really well remotely. Or if you put them in like an open plan office, like we had, or kind of have now, then they might not be so happy because they want a bit of peace and quiet. So yeah, there's definitely different roles that work well in this.
We also have a question from Stefan Densmore, who's asking, presuming you use a distributed team, which we do have at WPMU Dev, do you purposely hire tech support / developers in opposite midnight zones, or is that not a big deal? He says that he knows Sun Microsystems made a point of doing this.
Good question. Actually, I don't really mind. When it comes to hiring developers, I don't care where they are. I mean, there are advantages to working with people whose time crosses over with you. Big advantages. You get to live chat more, and there are advantages when people are working almost opposite time shifts, because you get to kind of finish your work, then hand it over, it gets done, and then you can assess feedback, and then it gets done. It's a really efficient process. The only one where we really do look at time zones, obviously, is support sales, because we want to be able to cover the clock well, and we have some pretty intense reporting mechanisms that measure like our first responder times and how well we get to customers. I think we try to price auditing within like under an hour, and yeah, you have to look at people around the world and look at time zones to get that right.
During the webinar, you talked a lot about the during the hiring process. You said you set tasks for applicants, and they're usually tasks that similar to what they do in their day-to-day work. Can you expand a bit more about what the tasks involve for developers, support staff, and also at that stage of the process, of the hiring process, what percentage of people tend to bow out and not even bother doing the task?
That's a good. Actually, I'll start with the last question, bow out one.
The more fun question.
Well, I like to. I mean, once people have kind of jumped over the hoops to actually send you a proper application, so I don't even bother. You just delete and archive. What are the ones that they? Even if they have jumped over some hoops, they haven't done all the other things. Then you took them off. But you explain to them then the process. You say it's going to. Take this amount of time, we're going to have this, we're going to have this. and probably, you know, it's not too huge. I'd say maybe like about a third of people would drop out at that point. They'd be like, I just don't want to do that. I want a job. I want to get engaged. I don't want to get engaged in this long, annoying process. I think that's because they've already jumped over a load of hoops to get there. Once you actually send them the task, you probably see another half drop out though. They look at it, and in case of developers, if we're looking for a developer, we're looking for somebody who's actually really good. And so we're going to give them a task that's going to require them to have a lot of experience and maturity and knowledge and background. So that's when it really drops off. But once you've got people who've happily completed the free trial task, I'd say it's pretty much 100% of those that you then want to go through to a paid trial thing will go through. You're pretty much hooked. In terms of tasks, you can actually see one for yourself. If you go to inksub.com careers again, and I think there's the support role with that. You can see there's a trial task that we ask people to complete, links to in the job application, and that's actually a bit more work than just providing your basic kind of details and information. But we find it's a really, really great kind of thing to hop over to find ourselves serious candidates. And the same with developers. Like I said, we look for a tough task. You know, we don't say, okay, change this text in this plugin. We say, add this functionality, or you know, kind of customize this particular aspect of this code. And like I said, it's more or less always something that we've actually recently asked our developers to do. So it reflects reality, and we've got a good measure of whether it's any good.
Do you ever look at resumes and application letters at all? Because when you hired me, I don't think you looked at my resume at all. Or do you think resumes are redundant and, you know, people should be just hired completely on merit?
I still don't know. Have you got a degree? I think I just assumed you did because you were working for like News Limited. So like, yeah. Qualified. Yeah, all right. Yeah,
unless I said I was.
That's a good point. Yeah, although I do believe there are some important stories about, you know, kind of kangaroos and things on the internet published prior to writing my WordPress. What I was going to say, no, not really. The only reason I generally look at them is to find out, you know, kind of where somebody's living, or maybe like how old they are, or their kind of context, or a bit of maybe their job history. Bjorn, who joined us recently, he actually had quite a fun resume. It was actually kind of a bit of comedy in there, describing something about doing evil things, making evil companies look good. I thought that sounds like that. The standard thing, but yeah, as a rule, not at all. And I think there was an article in the paper the other day actually about one of the major kind of graduate hiring firms in the States saying that they're actually going to remove the degree qualification component of their graduate programs, which is hilarious because it's a graduate program, because it's just not an indicator of success. You know, people, in my experience, you know, can do great work with or without tertiary qualifications, and you know, if you do great work and if you're a good person to work with, then absolutely, I'm definitely not going to be. I don't think anybody should be excluding anybody because they didn't spend 3 years in a share house smoking pot on Mondays.
Okay, last question. We don't have any other questions unless someone would like to drop one in the Q&A on the side of the webinar. But last question from me. One of the points you make, or you just made in the webinar, is that the perfect people can be right in front of you. Our CTO, Aaron, was originally a member before you hired him, and our head of support, Tim, he was a member too, helping out in the forums. How many former members do you think you've actually hired?
Oh no, I don't know. Quite a lot. Yeah, heaps. I reckon, I'm going to say with the support team developers, about half, I reckon.
So you think it's half? Wow, that's quite significant.
Yeah, I reckon it's about, probably former members, or certainly people who engaged with us or who are on the email list or who knew somebody was on the email list. That's why it's so great, because it's people who already know what you're about, you know, kind of what you're doing, and are engaged with it. And so that means, you know, there's so much more chance of kind of being a good fit. And there's as well, if people are out there are actually looking for work in this area. I mean, you apply for a role with a company that you're already completely familiar with. Believe me, they're going to go, wow, that's amazing. You totally engage with our stuff. You love our stuff. And it's going to give you a huge leg up. The first gig I ever got actually developing was, funny enough, developing. I wasn't developing. I was going to put in the plan together, and then Andrew was doing the developing. Was for a company called Hattrick.net, Swedish football fantasy game. That, as it completely random chance happened, they got in touch because they were interested in what I'd done at EduBlogs, to do a football version of that. And I'd been addicted at length to their game in a couple of years prior. And so it was just like, okay, let's do it. Very easy.
We have one last minute question from Braden Wilrath. He's asked, are there any specific things you should include in the trial task? And as somebody who isn't hugely technical, how would you go about creating the trial task?
All right, Braden, thank you for that. Good question. There's the challenge, isn't it? And I guess I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I don't actually know what you should put in the trial task. I pretty much only know that it should be something that takes a certain amount of time. And my suggestion, recommendation for you or anybody who's doing this, presuming that we're looking for developers here, is that you find a developer somewhere, somebody, kind of beg, borrow, steal somebody's time to help you to design and to put that together and then evaluate candidates. However you can, you've got to get that first person before you can really start engaging in this whole process. I mean, you can give it a go, but I mean, how are you going to be able to judge whether their syntax is any good, or if they used a particular security call or this or that? I mean, you're not. I'm not. You have to have somebody who's going to be able to do this, and so that's I mean, it's a huge caveat when it comes to getting this process up and going. But I'm certain that if you put your mind to it, you'll be able to come up with it.
Cool. That's all our questions for today, but thanks for that, James. It was really insightful answers.
I've been doing it for a while. I'm sure I'll know a bunch more about it in the future. I certainly hope I will. Thanks for the questions, Ray. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. We've got another 2 sessions coming. The next one's going to be about actually how do you then manage and work with people ongoing in remote teams, developing products and the like. And the last one's going to be a bit more fun, or talking about mistakes, the fun and joys of mistakes.